Hello and welcome back to a brand new video. Did you know that today is National Villain Day? I didn't, but as a way of celebrating, I decided I would do a video celebrating National Villain Day by reading my free short story, which is available through my newsletter, Fire and Ice, which is a Morgan le Fay short story. First of all, I love villains. If you know me at all, that's no secret. Sometimes they're even my favourite part of a book or a film, and Morgan le Fay is in particular one of my favourite all-time villains. So it was only natural that when I started writing Prophecies of Fate series, which is all about King Arthur legends with a twist, I was going to have to do a Morgan le Fay origin story. So yeah, that's what I did. It is, as I say, it is free for download through my newsletter, so if it is something that you would like to own and keep for yourself, you can join up to my newsletter, which I will leave a link to in the description box below. But before I read the story, I'm just going to give you a little overview of who Morgan le Fay was. So she was considered to be Arthur's half sister and his sworn enemy. Some sources don't make her inherently evil, but I do. She's bad. She's bad throughout my series, so there will be no redemption here for her or for her son Mordred in my story at all. So without further ado, I'm not going to waste your time any longer. I'm going to start reading Fire and Ice, a Morgan le Fay short story. I hope you enjoy. The dense darkness surrounding me is almost palpable, broken only by the flicker of candlelight as it dances upon the wick. I stare at it, and as the single flame mocks me, my hand reaches out, tempted. It's a curious thing, fire, so deadly to others and yet to me. I pause, studying it. I could snuff it out in a heartbeat, or give it more power than it has ever known. It's a choice I face every day, every moment. To cool the fire that runs through my veins, or to let it burn, to blaze until there is nothing left. Instead, I withdraw my hand and continue to watch the flame play joyously. I envy its freedom, its simplicity, for I am still tied to this place. I let my eyes scan the darkness, recalling better times. But this place, once so grand, once my home, is now nothing but an empty shell, a place of darkness and heartache. My heartache, my father's, although he never knew the extent of my mother's betrayal. But I know, oh yes, I know exactly what she and that loathsome man did. And now as I await my mother's screams of grief, I know they have paid the ultimate price. For I am Morgan le Fay, and this is my story. Where it all began. My father is dead. I stare at the parchment in my hand, numb to everything around me. He is dead, killed by the man who had waged war against him for so long. Uther Pendragon, the High King of Britain. The very sound of his name ignites a fire within me, setting my blood aflame, awakening my power. Before I know it, the parchment in my hand begins to smoulder, curling in on itself at the edges, and for a moment I watch it burn, the face of my father's murderer mocking me from within the flames. I thrust my hand into the fire, fury racing through me, just as his face vanishes. Morgan! I flinch at the sound of my name as my tutor's voice jerks me back to the present. Immediately realising what I had done, I doused the flames. I had flown too close to the sun, yet again. Allowing what is left of it to fall to the floor, I stare at the parchment, my eyes scanning what was once left of my mother's flowing script. Her words, so short and sweet, would forever mark me. I bring you grave news, my child. Your father was mortally wounded in battle. He is dead. Dead. I am vaguely aware of a Newfound quietly closing the door of my chamber before appearing at my side, her hand soon finding mine. What is it, my child? She asks, her eyes searching my face for answers that I myself am struggling with. When I remain silent, she takes my face in her hands, forcing me to look at her. Speak to me, Morgan, she commands, her eyes boring into mine. My father is dead, I state simply, unable to believe the words I hear myself speak. A Newfound gasps, my child. The shadows from the meagre candlelight make her look much older now. She takes my hand in hers, but I turn from her, pulling myself from her grasp. I do not want, nor do I ask, for her sympathy. A Newfound follows me, but I hold my hand up to stop her. Even now I can feel the power within me flowing, and I know she feels it too. She ignores how close I am to turning it. She knows how close I am to turning it upon her. Leave me, I hiss, but she ignores me as she continues to advance further. I round on her, the burning in my veins ever increasing. I know it will take but one more step before I call on something far greater to convey my message to her. I said, leave me. She must have seen the fury in my eyes because she straightened to her full height, allowing some of her own powers to come forth, meeting me head on. I feel the air in the room thicken with tension as we face each other, and I wonder briefly what will happen next. Newfan's eyes harden as she looks at me. You cannot ignore me, Morgan, she states, her voice unyielding. We need to talk about what I saw. She drops her gaze to the parchment at her feet before turning her attention back to me. Not now, I tell her coldly. Newfan's face is expressionless as she continues to hold my gaze, then nods curtly. Tomorrow, then. And with that she is gone, sweeping from the room, closing the door behind her. I watch her depart disdainfully. For 8 summers she may have held the power, but that is changing now. I can feel it. In time, my power will grow, and she will be nothing to me. Left alone, my gaze drops to the parchment, and I pick it up, placing it upon my writing desk. I know I must acknowledge this news, but I cannot find it in me to offer comfort to my mother. Not yet. Retreating to my bed, I lay down and finally let the tears come, crying for the first and last time since my arrival here 8 summers ago. Please, Father, I sobbed, clutching his arm desperately. I cannot leave you. Father looked down at me for a moment. His eyes were sympathetic, but his answer resolute. Morgan, you cannot stay here. You need to be safe, away from here. But you can keep me safe, I insisted weakly, just as you are keeping Mother safe. Father smiled sadly. How I wish that were true, child, he admitted. But this place is no longer safe for you. But I looked to my mother for support, but all I could see was my own pain reflected back at me through her eyes. Leave here with your head held high, Morgan, my father advised, and one day when this war is over, you shall return to us. Looking at his battle-weary face, I saw in his eyes a grim resolve, and I knew then that I could not win this fight. So being the daughter of Galois, Duke of Cornwall, I gathered what little strength I had left and lifted my head defiantly, just as he had instructed. Gone were my tears, replaced by a cold, hard resentment. Resentment for Uther, who had started all this, and for my parents, who were sending me away because of it. I may have been only 10 summers, but even then I knew something in me had changed in that moment. As you wish, Father, I said dutifully, knowing that was all he wanted to hear. He embraced me then, and if I had known that was to have been the last moment we shared, I might never have let go. Instead, I boarded the cart and left Camelot without looking back. Later that night, I arrived at the place that was to become my prison for the next 8 summers. It was that same night I met Newfan, who, seeing something in me, took me under her wing to nurture me and my powers so similar to her own. That night changed me irrevocably in ways that no one could have foreseen. In the wake of my father's death, days passed slowly, each as uneventful as the last. I continued my lessons with a Newfan, still refusing to speak about or acknowledge my father's unnatural and untimely passing. Every day I learn more of healing and herbal treatments, but Newfan also begins to teach me more of the darker side of the world. I ask her why my lessons are changing, but even as she insists otherwise, I see in her eyes that she speaks untruths to me. I know she is keeping something from me. Every night I retreat to my chamber alone, with nothing but the thoughts that continue to plague me. Had my father suffered at the hands of his enemy? Had Uther looked him in the eye as he drove his sword into him? Had he seen the life drained from my father's eyes as he took his last breath? I have an ever-increasing burning desire to return the favour. Every waking moment these thoughts consume me until they are all I know, and through it all my mother's letter remains unanswered and ignored. I cannot find the words she would want to hear. How can I offer her support when my own thoughts are so dark and filled with vengeance? It's almost a month later that I receive a second letter from my mother. I force myself to read it, fully expecting her to renew her pleas for my reply. But as I read her words, written so selfishly, so carelessly, with no regard for my own pain, I am consumed by a rage unlike any other. I lose all reason as her words finally hit me. She is to marry Uther Pendragon. She is to marry my father's killer. The parchment blazes in my hands, her words destroyed by the flames. I long to unleash my power, to see everything around me explode into flames, to raze it all to the ground, but suddenly something stops me. There is a change within me, something that is strange to me, something I do not understand. I can feel the darkness coming upon me, but I hold it at bay as Anufin's last teachings echo in my mind. The line we walk is treacherous, Morgan. The line between the light and the dark. It doesn't take much to cross it, but once it has been crossed, you cannot go back. I know not how I got here, but suddenly I find myself outside Anufin's chamber, my request already formed in my mind. Reaching out, I knock upon her door. Almost immediately she opens it, as if expecting me. She smiles, although I see it does not reach her eyes. You come at last, she murmurs, granting me admittance. I step inside and turn to face her as she closes the door. You knew I would come? I question, my eyes narrowing. Since your father's death, it was only a matter of time, my child. Her usual tone of affection is hollow, bereft of feeling. I stare at her. Like me, she has changed somehow, and I find myself strangely drawn to her, to the power she wields. She takes a step towards me, her eyes never leaving mine. Why did you come here, child? I looked at her, and I am aware she already knows the answer. You already know, I reply simply. She smiles thinly. You must ask the question, Morgan, she insists. You have power beyond the benign, don't you, I ask. I can feel it. Her eyes bore into mine. And what of it? I want you to teach me everything you know. She takes a moment as she studies me, and I stare back at her, my gaze unwavering. I know she will not find me wanting. You understand what it is you ask, she presses, her black eyes boring into mine. I meant what I said in our last lesson. Once you make this choice, there is no going back. Now it's my turn to smile. I have no wish to go back. She holds out her hand. Then give me your hand. As I reach out, she grasps my wrist and swiftly slashes my palm with a dagger hidden within her robes. I do not cry out, nor do I pull away. And as I watch my blood pool in my hand, snaking down my arm, I smile, knowing I am forever marked as a servant of the dark. In the weeks and months that follow, I feel the change in myself increase as I become something far greater than I ever was. Each day my powers grow and strengthen, and just as I always knew I would, I exceed all of Anufin's expectations. But I am no fool. I know that if I want my plan to succeed, I must listen to her teachings, soak up her knowledge, and ultimately take for myself the power she can only dream of. Anufin teaches me many things: how to mix the deadliest of potions, how to alter one's shape to resemble another, how to change the very fabric of the earth, and it isn't long before I master them all and more. But by far the most useful lesson I learn is control. For with this power comes a great rush, unlike anything I have ever known, and as Anufin points out on more than one occasion, it would be quite easy to lose yourself to it. You burn with such fire, Morgan, Anufin never tires of telling me, but you must not let it consume you. You must temper that fire. And so it was, I learned how to master my emotions, to douse the fire with ice, a perfect balance. The greatest test I ever faced was hearing that my mother's wedding had taken place. I did not acknowledge it in any way other than to let it drive me to further my knowledge, to harness more power. I ignored every letter she sent thereafter, ignored her pleas for understanding, and eventually my mother gave up trying. I would never understand. And so I waited, biding my time. They had to believe they were safe. They had to believe enough time had passed that I longed for a family reunion. Many summers passed in silence before I wrote to her, filling the letter with words of regret and pain, an outpouring of guilt for my earlier behaviour. As expected, she wasted no time in forgiving me and accepted my offer of reconciliation without question. My return to Camelot was quickly arranged, and with a final word of warning from Anufin ringing in my ears, I rode from the convent, free at last. Free to avenge my father's death. Free to finally have my revenge. I thought I was prepared. How wrong I was. For nothing could have prepared me for the fury I felt at seeing my mother standing so dutifully at Uther Pendragon's side, the pair of them looking so happy together, carefree, as if they had done nothing wrong. Temper the flame. Your true intentions must remain hidden. As Anufin's words came back to me, I felt my temper turn to ice as my reasoning returned and my mask slid back into place. I felt nothing as I hugged my mother and allowed the man I despised most in the world to kiss my hand. I smiled and simpered as he charmed me, conversed with him over dinner, and as time passed, my plan began to fall into place. There was only one problem: Uther's faithful adviser, Merlin. The king went nowhere without him, and Merlin's eyes were always upon me, ever watchful. His constant vigilance was swiftly becoming a problem for me, a problem I had to rectify. Killing him would draw too much attention, so instead I visited my mother, who listened attentively to my tale of woe as I told her of the unease I felt around Merlin. Wishing to help, she took me to Uther, who proved more than willing to listen to my complaints, consoling me and promising swift action. My plan had worked. I know not of the conversation that took place, but Merlin's presence in court soon faded, and I was able to resume my plan, safe in the knowledge that no one stood in my way now. I was free to act. And so the fateful night began like any other. I shared bread and wine with my mother and Uther as if nothing were amiss, while I waited for my chance. It didn't take much. Uther was well into his 5th cup of wine and paying me no heed when I set about my plan. A small distraction across the room was all it took. I watched with barely concealed joy as he finished his wine and poured another cup, oblivious to what I had done. The poison would act slowly. No one would know anything was amiss. I only had to wait. Later that night, Uther stumbles to his chamber across the corridor from my mother's. I make my way to my own chamber, waiting in the dark. Closing my eyes, I picture Merlin's face, noting every contour, the set of his jaw, the timbre of his voice. Opening my eyes, I wave my hand over a candle, a flame immediately springing to life. Picking up the looking glass by my bed, I find myself staring directly into the eyes of the man Uther trusts most in the world, Merlin. Smiling at the irony, I slip out into the empty corridor and make my way towards Uther's chamber. I don't bother knocking, I just let myself in, and find Uther writhing in pain upon the floor. His eyes are closed and sweat covers his brow, glistening in the candlelight, his skin grey. He groans and continues to thrash about as spasms grip his body. I close the door and move to stand over him. His eyes find mine, and seeing Merlin's face, he reaches out. "My friend, help me," he gasps. I continue to watch, making no attempt to intervene. Why would I? He deserves this. He deserves this and more. "Merlin, please," he begs, desperate now as tears course down his face. He cries out, and suddenly I am there. I kneel at his side, covering his mouth with my hand. His eyes widen with shock as he sees my face for the first time. He tries to pull away, but I raise a hand, stilling his movement. He is at my mercy now. "The more you fight it, the quicker it will act," I inform him. Smiling, I give him time to take in what is happening. "You look surprised, Uther," I muse as I look down upon my father's killer. "Please, Morgan," he pleads. Please fetch help." I narrow my eyes. "Now why would I do that?" I whisper. Another wave of pain racks his body, and his groans once again fill the chamber. "I need help." I shake my head slowly. "You need to pay for what you did." Seeing the confusion in his eyes, I continue. "You took my father's life. That needless war cost me so much. Now you must answer for your actions." I pause, studying him. I can see he's losing the war within himself. His strength is draining fast as blood trickles from his lips into his beard. "Now it is your turn to look upon the face of your killer. Just as yours was the last face my father saw, I shall be the last face you see. Just as you took everything from me, I shall take everything from you. You will die this night, knowing that when it mattered most, I leant down and whispered in his ear, you were powerless against me." It wasn't long after that, but I was there for his final moments to witness his last breath. I smile as the light finally left his eyes. Now, as I sit in the darkness contemplating what I have done, I feel no remorse, only a sense that after all these years, justice has finally been done. I wait, poised. Somehow it's not enough to know that I have killed Uther Pendragon. I need to hear my mother's cries of grief. I need to feel her pain. I need to know they have both paid the ultimate price for their betrayal. But my plan is far from over, and as my mother's cries finally tear through the night, I know that my time to leave has arrived. So that night, under the cover of darkness, I leave Camelot for the second time, but I shall be back, for Camelot is mine. There you go. So, I hope you enjoyed hearing Fire and Ice, a Morgan le Fay short story. And like I said, if you want to own your own copy of that, please feel free to join my mailing list. I will leave a link to in the description box for you to do just that. I send an email on the first Friday of every month, and in that email you get life updates, you get writing updates, and you get some book recommendations as well. Also, if you feel so inclined to continue reading about Morgan in the Prophecies of Fate series, feel free to check out the Book of Legend. This book is free in ebook on all platforms, and then you've got The Prison of Ice and Shadows to move on to, and then finally The Cup of Destiny as well. So I hope you find something to enjoy amongst those books. That's it for this week. Please feel free to share your thoughts about Fire and Ice in the comments below, and I shall see you next week for a brand new video. Bye.